is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. The latest round of international diplomacy to avoid a conflict over Ukraine. Now the UK's Foreign Secretary heads to Moscow.
Our other headlines: scientists in the UK make a major breakthrough on nuclear fusion, harnessing the energy source of the stars.
It is my expectation that we will be able to end the last domestic restrictions a full month early, Mr. Speaker.
The British Prime Minister says all COVID restrictions could end early after facing lawmakers for the first time since his cabinet reshuffle.
A reversal of fortune for some of the world's big names in the car industry, with profit falls, recalls and legal action.
And a victory 16 years in the making. Lindsay Jacobellis wins the first gold for the United States at her 5th Winter Olympics.
Britain's foreign minister has warned of thousands of civilian casualties if Russia invades Ukraine.
Liz Truss is heading to Moscow to discuss the crisis with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. She said an invasion would draw Russia into a quagmire and be met with unprecedented sanctions. Russia's ambassador to London has warned the UK against making what he called pointless threats. Well, in a moment, we'll be in Ukraine with our correspondent Natalie Carney. First of all, let's head to Moscow and talk to Stuart Smith. So, Stuart, the UK has already threatened to impose economic sanctions if Russia invades Ukraine. What's Truss likely to say on this visit?
Yeah, the Foreign Minister will be joined by the Defence Minister on Friday. Her mission is to get across to the Kremlin. The Foreign Office says that the only way forward for Russia is to cease its aggression and engage in meaningful talks. The UK prioritising de-escalation on the Russian side, moving its troops away from the border with Ukraine. Also making sure that Russia understands that, in the UK's opinion, the Kremlin is damaging its standing and interests on the global stage. And thirdly, Liz Truss keen to point out, from the UK point of view, the Ukraine has a right to self-determination. They're the big three things she wants to talk to the Kremlin about. But the ambassador of Russia to the United Kingdom says if that's all, then talks could be very short. Russia, he says, has been watching the news and is keeping a keen eye on everything the UK is saying. What he is interested in hearing, though, potentially, is if the UK has some contribution to make related to Russia's national security demands. This meeting comes while UK and Russia relations are very low, partly due to the numerous sanctions the United Kingdom has implemented on Russia. Some of those after the annexation of Crimea, other ones due to assassination attempts on British soil, which the UK government blames Russia for. Now, the sanctions regime that the United Kingdom is proposing and is due to go through Parliament on Thursday tomorrow should allow the UK government to sanction a whole swathe of potential top aides or top links to the Kremlin. Business people, politicians, anyone that has money in London. Around 33 oligarchs are billionaires from Russia and have their wealth stored in London. And Liz Truss says she would like there to be nowhere to hide for these funds. That would only be implemented, though, if Russia invades Ukraine, which Russia insists it has no desire to do and indeed will not attack any country. While the UK makes clear to Russia what will happen if Russia invades Ukraine in terms of sanctions, the European Union is also considering sanctions. But the German Chancellor says, unlike the UK, he's not going to make what those sanctions are public.
We agree that we will act together on the sanctions which would be required. They are ready to be implemented. Anytime the situation arises, we are in a position to take the decision together. Germany and the United States, Europe and the United States, the NATO countries. But I'm confident it will be very effective. That's also the message Russia has understood, and so I believe this is the actual result. But we have decided not to make the measures public.
Meanwhile, Stuart, the UK and European countries are committing more ground troops to Eastern Europe.
That's right. The United Kingdom, 350 more troops to Poland, and potentially, the UK Prime Minister says, warships and fighter jets to southeastern Europe. That's where around 6 warships are heading from Syria, from Russia's bases there into the Black Sea. Important because that's where Ukraine and Russia both have naval bases. The United States is continuing its deployment of American troops into Europe, with around 1,700 making the trip over to land in Poland today, and a further up to a maximum of 3,000 promised for other countries in Eastern Europe.
Stuart Smith in Moscow, thank you very much.
Well, let's talk now to our correspondent Natalie Carney in Ukraine. Natalie, the Ukrainian foreign minister has also been talking about economic sanctions on Russia.
Yes, speaking with his Spanish counterpart in the capital, Kiev, the Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba he acknowledged that all this diplomatic talk is alleviating some of the concerns, but the situation still remains very, very tense. Kuleba said that they were already grounds in which the West could start implementing new sanctions on Russia, saying that Moscow had already violated international law and broken the Minsk agreement in issuing Ukrainian citizens who are living in areas occupied by pro-Russian separatists Russian passports. Russia denies that this is in any violation of international law. Kuleba was saying that Russia is trying to take revenge for the Soviet Union losing the Cold War, and said to the West that applying these sanctions now on this basis would demonstrate the seriousness of the West's intentions and readiness for decisive action.
Well, the diplomacy continues, but so too do the delivery of arms. More U.S. military hardware arriving in Ukraine.
Yes, 80 tons of it today arrived in the capital, Kyiv, from the United States. There was also a shipment from the UK that also arrived in the Ukraine 2 weeks ago as well. We also saw 90 tons of machinery coming from the U.S. This is all part of the $200 million in what they call lethal aid that they have promised to the Ukraine. As Stuart was mentioning, we're also still seeing a lot of troop movement, a lot of troop reshuffling around the east of Europe. And Lithuania and Estonia, both former Soviet countries, have now asked the U.S. and NATO if these new troops could become permanent troops. Very concerned, of course, about any potential aggression from Russia going forward. This crisis could possibly thereby then be reshaping sort of NATO's position within Eastern Europe, something that Vladimir Putin would not like very much.
Natalie, thanks for that. Natalie Carney, our correspondent in Ukraine.
Scientists in the UK have made a major breakthrough generating energy from nuclear fusion, the process that powers the stars.
Once developed, it's thought nuclear fusion could be the future source of near limitless power.
A team of researchers generated around 11 megawatts of heat in just 5 seconds, enough energy to power 10,000 homes. Neil Cairns from CGTN's science show Razor is here with us in the studio. So, Neil, how significant is this?
What you're trying to do with nuclear fusion, you're trying to do two things. You're trying to create a reaction that, number one, sustains itself, but also creates more energy than it takes to start it and sustain it. What you're doing is you're jamming together two different types of hydrogen in the same reaction that powers the sun. And in the sun, of course, we've got and the stars, we've got the immense gravity which is causing that reaction to be able to sustain itself. But here we have to come up with technologies, in this case at the Joint European Torus, a magnetic containment field inside a reactor known as a tokamak. So what this is, 5 seconds doesn't seem like a long time, but it's proof that the technology they've been chasing and the one that will go into ITER, the international collaboration of 35 countries, including China and Russia, which will start in 2025, another giant experiment. It proves that they're on the right track And this experiment tells them what they need to adjust as they get ready to start their reaction.
And for those of us, including this rather dim-witted journalist who has no science qualifications, what is nuclear fusion, and what is it in this breakthrough that's so significant?
The fact is that it's given out more energy than was put in, but, you know, only for 5 seconds. You want that reaction to carry on sustaining itself. And to do that, like I say, we haven't got the gravity of the sun, so we have to come up with fixes. In fact, they've got 100 million degrees inside that reactor, whereas the sun is only 10 million degrees, right? And that's because we need to come up with these different things, because we don't have the sun's and the stars' immense gravity. So, like I said, you're trying to jam these two different types of hydrogen together, and when they do that, they give off neutrons and energy. And that neutrons heat up the reactor, which heats up water, which drives a turbine. That's how you'll get your energy in the long run.
And we talk about this a lot on this programme. The world, of course, in the middle of an energy crisis. Is this part of the answer?
It's a huge part of the answer, but I'm afraid I won't see that answer come to fruition, I don't think, in my lifetime. It's something for the second half of the century, but not only in terms of clean energy. You know, if we can crack this, you can imagine a world in the future, a post-scarcity world, if we can get this to an affordable and easily made technology. And if you really want to go far, you can imagine this is the power that could take us to the stars in the future.
And this is obviously a truly international, collaborative, scientific endeavour.
Yeah, the Joint European Torus is, as I said, it's the proving ground for ITER, which is International Thermonuclear Energy Reactor, which is now just uses ITER, the acronym, the way. It is a collaboration of 35 countries around the world, including China and Russia and many others, the US and most European countries, in order to try and crack this problem of how do you keep this reaction, how do you start this reaction and keep it going and make sure that it's giving out more energy than it takes to create it.
Fascinating. Neil, thank you very much. Even I understood that. Extraordinary. Neil Cairns, thank you very much. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, Biden summons the bosses. We'll be in the United States next to hear about the president's meeting.
Search CGTN Europe wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe to the Agenda podcast. The Agenda with me, Stephen Cole, always gets to the heart of the story. Just subscribe today and listen now.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more...
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
This is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities. Reinvent. Find new opportunities. Discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
The world has changed under the pressure of the pandemic. For many of us, life is returning to some kind of normal. As we're adapting to changes in all of our lives, let Global Business Europe be your guide to the new normal. Join us weekdays on CGTN.
Beijing, China's capital and its cultural nerve center, a modern metropolis with traditional roots. And now it becomes the first city in the world to host both Summer and Winter Olympics. After 14 years, the biggest sporting extravaganza returns to Beijing. Thousands of athletes from around the globe will compete in over 100 events at 3 zones. Cheered on by over 1.4 billion Chinese citizens and millions abroad. CGTN will bring you a ringside view of the historic event. 2022 Beijing Olympics, the games that matter on CGTN. See the difference.
This week on Razor, a potential cure for premature aging. And farming the vertical way.
We've automated pretty much every component, so we've got robots on each side where energy is required to obviously move crops, and then we've got this almost like roller coaster type system for effectively sorting out crops, harvesting and cleaning.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. Just a reminder that CGTN is available to watch for free on all the major digital platforms, on Smart TV or online on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube and Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK on Freeview.
Now, your car might burst into flames at any moment. It's never the best news to share with your customers if you're a car manufacturer. Not the only bad headlines to tell you about. Hyundai and Kia are recalling nearly 500,000 vehicles in the United States over fears they could catch fire even when switched off. The South Korean car makers have asked vehicle owners to park outside and away from buildings.
And Tesla is expanding its own recall in the United States, this time over faulty windshields. That's on top of 800,000 Teslas being recalled due to a seatbelt issue. Plus, the electric car maker is also facing another legal headache. It says the state of California intends to sue over allegations of systematic racial discrimination and harassment.
And Toyota is the latest car maker to lower its production targets due to, guess what, the global shortage of semiconductor chips. The Japanese company's third quarter results did beat expectations, but operating profits dropped by more than 20%. Well, let's gather this together and talk to David Bailey, Professor of Business Economics at the University of Birmingham. David, where to start? Well, Hyundai and Kia recalling hundreds of thousands of cars, telling customers who've presumably paid a fortune to park outside because they might catch fire. It's not a good week, is it?
No, not really. 500,000 cars affected in the United States. And as you say, never a great image that your car may catch fire. I think they'll get through this because they seem to have identified the problem quickly. They're being transparent about it. They're looking to fix it. If you recall that big issue that Toyota had over a decade ago, some key lessons came out of that. And I think if Hyundai and Kia can tackle it quickly, they should avoid major damage, I think. And
in your experience of the industry, do customers forgive the company if you're open and transparent, or do they just shrug their shoulders in despair and buy another brand next time?
I think it comes back to being transparent, fixing it quickly and helping, fix the problem easily for the consumer. I've got a Tesla at the moment that's the subject of a recall. It's to do with the front trunk potentially opening. I got an email, I've booked it in for service, somebody's coming to see me, hopefully fixed very quickly. So I think as long as that is done, then you avoid brand damage.
Let's talk about Toyota's results and the company's sales and production outlook being slashed. I mean, it's again not great news, is it?
No, it isn't. And I think Toyota is the firm that's probably handled the whole chip shortage better than any other car maker. It didn't cut its chip orders during the coronavirus and the early wave. It stockpiled chips, but even it is now being affected. So it's cut its forecasted sort of sales from 9.3 down to 9, now 8.5 million for this fiscal year. And its operating profits took a big hit towards the back end of 2021. Having said that, it's done what other car makers are doing. It's focused on high margin models. It's looked to cut costs, and it's reduced the amount of discounting it's done. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what the end of year performance actually looks like. A lot of uncertainty around that at the moment.
Let's talk about Tesla. Tesla says the state of California intends to sue over these allegations of systemic racial discrimination and harassment. I mean, the company has been associated with a number of scandals over the years. I wonder to what extent do they affect the company's performance, or is it just a sideshow?
I think this is potentially serious for Tesla. I mean, allegations of racial discrimination are extremely serious. It is not a great image for a company. Last October, there was a jury in another case which awarded about $137 million of punitive damages against Tesla, which is contested. But Now, this is a company which really has thrived on the back of its not only its technology but its brand image of trying to make the world a better place in terms of reducing carbon emissions, going over to solar energy, electric cars, home energy storage. Racial discrimination, or allegations of it, does not fit very nicely with that. So I think there is potential for brand damage for the firm. And remember as well, it has a sky-high valuation, which means it's able to raise finance easily to invest. So they have to take this very seriously.
The EU has announced a plan to increase semiconductor production in Europe. How will that news be received? Is it the solution to the global industry supply chain problem, or is it simply too far down the road to be an issue?
It's part of the solution in the long term. So I don't think the current issues are really going to start to be addressed until the back end of this year, when some extra chip capacity comes online. So, the car makers that we've been talking about will continue to face these really challenging circumstances. Longer term, the EU is saying, let's build more chips in the EU. I mean, I think longer term, what they're trying to do really is have much more of an integrated supply chain for electric vehicles in general. Chips, batteries, the electric vehicle supply chain in the EU, rather than having to rely, for example, on Southeast Asia. But also, car makers themselves are looking more and more at doing things in-house rather than relying on suppliers. So I think there's some big changes coming in the industry.
David, good to see you. Hope your Tesla gets fixed, by the way. David
You
Bailey, Professor of Business Economics at the University of Birmingham.
Key players in the electric power industry in the United States are set to meet President Joe Biden as part of his efforts to promote his Build Back Better agenda. The social safety net bill is currently stalled in Congress. Let's talk now to our correspondent, Sarah Walton in New York. So, Sarah, who is expected at this meeting and what will they be talking about?
Well, this meeting is set to take place at the White House in person today, not virtually, which is how Joe Biden has been doing a lot of his business recently. But in the room, we expect the president, of course, and also the CEOs of companies like HP, Microsoft, General Motors, Ford, Salesforce, and Etsy, amongst others. So all big names on Wall Street, but a real spread of different kinds of industries being represented. Also, we think in attendance will be the Commerce Secretary, Gina Raimondo, and Climate Advisor Gina McCarthy, which I think gives us an idea of the direction that these talks are going to take. The main aim of the discussions are to look at ways of strengthening the US economy, of increasing worker productivity, and also lowering inflation. But the focus is going to be on finding ways to do that in an environmentally friendly way. So we've already heard from the CEO of Ford, Jim Farley, saying that he's very much looking forward to having a conversation with the president about how the US can take a lead in a global transition to emissions-free transport. So Ford and General Motors have been getting very heavily involved in electric car manufacturing, and they are keen to see consumer incentives for buying electric cars, electric vehicles increased to help the environment, and also to help their business as well. So those are the sort of issues that we're going to see discussed today.
And this all feeds into Biden's Build Back Better agenda. The bill, though, has been stuck in Congress. What's the latest on the president's attempts to get that passed?
Well, you know, in the UK, we sometimes say laws get stuck in parliamentary ping pong. So I think in the US, we're going to have to call this Congress cricket, because the bill passed the House and then got run out in the Senate. It's a big bill. It's $2 trillion worth of measures to try and help the US economy recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. And it got stuck in the Senate because Joe Biden couldn't get backing for it from a member of his own party, and that was West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, who said he was concerned about the size of the bill, and also he said the potential for it to add to inflation. So now Joe Biden has admitted that the bill is unlikely to be passed in its current form, and he says he's open to splitting it up, to watering areas down, even dropping some parts of it altogether with the hope of coming back to them later in his presidency. It's thought he'll start by trying to get areas that cover climate and clean energy passed first, because those are the areas that have been mostly written and financed as well. And it again shows Joe Biden's emphasis on environmental issues. But, you know, they're in a race to do this now because the Democrats' very slim majority in the Senate looks set to disappear at the midterm elections. And I know they're in November, and we're only now just into February, but trust me, time has a habit of going very, very quickly when there is a US election on the horizon.
Sarah, thanks very much. Sarah Walton there in New York.
The Norwegian energy company Equinor is trading at a record high after reporting its biggest quarterly profit. Equinor generated $15 billion before tax in the last quarter and says it'll pay its shareholders $10 billion this year. Many energy companies are benefiting from those consumers facing those record prices.
Starbucks has been accused of firing 7 workers in the United States who were attempting to organize a trade union. Union leaders say that the dismissals in the state of Tennessee were made in retaliation, but the coffee chain says the staff were fired for knowingly violating safety and security policies, including reopening a store after closing time.
The British high street chain Primark is to launch a new fashion range with the fast food bakery Greggs. The collection is set to be unveiled later this month, while Greggs says it'll open a large cafe in Primark's main Birmingham store.
Danish shipping giant Maersk has posted record profits for 2021, bringing in more than $18 billion. It was largely driven by higher freight rates amid increased consumer demand and global supply chain issues. It comes after a difficult 2020 for the industry, as factories shut down at the start of the pandemic. But operational bottlenecks and congestion at ports are still continuing, leading to a huge rise in demand for air freight. Well, our correspondent Juliette Mann is here to tell us more. Juliette.
Thanks, Robin and Jeremy. Yeah, that's right. Air freight might only represent around 1% of the entire freight market in terms of volume, but it accounts for around 35% of the value. And air cargo between Asia and the US is at the highest levels ever. So much so that aircraft makers Boeing and Airbus are building more dedicated carriers and testing out sustainable aviation fuel. Now, a US cargo flow tracker says that 78.9 million kilograms of car parts were sent by air from Asia to the US in the first 10 months of 2021. That was just that alone. Compare that to the 3 million kilograms shipped during the same period in 2020. It's really gone up. Air freight expanded by 14.9% in 21. Sea freight, look, not so much, 7.86%. Now, so it might all sound like it makes business sense for air cargo systems at a time when global supply chains have been squeezed and with all the COVID-19 challenges, particularly for the air travel sector. But sending stuff by plane costs a lot more and is less kind to the planet. Now, sending goods by air from Asia to North America now costs as much as $15 per kilogram. That's pretty expensive. Well, Neil van der Waal is the Chief Air Freight Officer at Xeneta. He joins us now, and thanks for coming on the programme, Neil. Look, it used to be that certain goods would always be sent by air. I'm thinking about things like medicines that have a short shelf life. But now it's becoming a lifeline, isn't it, for some businesses, not just to keep their clients, but to keep their operations alive?
Absolutely, and good afternoon. Thank you for having me. Yes, we have seen in the last couple of months that shippers, manufacturers, due to the fact that there were so many issues on the ocean side, that they had to move their supply chain into air freight. Absolutely.
But you think about enormous companies like Walmart or maybe IKEA. They can presumably absorb the extra cost, or maybe they've got the welly to negotiate better rates. It's going to be smaller and medium-sized companies that are going to lose out here.
Well, it depends on the product. If you're selling a $19 product to your consumers and your transportation costs because of air will go up significantly, it might just become simply too expensive for them to move by air. So the option is actually trying to get it by ocean or have emptier shelves. It's not always that air is an option, purely from a cost point of view.
Is there an opportunity, though, for airlines here?
There is. You just mentioned the record numbers that Maersk announced. On the airline side, from a cargo point of view, we've seen record revenues being generated by the airlines because of the increased rates. That being said, I would like to emphasize it. By no means has that been free money. It's been very difficult for airlines to operate in this constant changing environment of COVID rules and regulations and markets opening up and closing down. So it's been very difficult for all parties in the supply chain, and we've seen the supply chain struggle. But yes, from a revenue point of view, it's been a good year, 2021.
Is that good year going to be transitory? Do you think it's just for now, in comparison to what a terrible 2020 it was?
Yes, we do not see any underlying trends changing that would make the market very different in the foreseeable future. So we would expect a comparable to 2021 when it comes to the shortage of capacity and elevator rates.
Of course, we had that ship that got wedged in the Suez Canal, and there have been supply chain issues. It's been very tricky with lockdowns all around the world. These are distorted market conditions, and that's something that the British International Freight Association has called on the UK government to investigate and to look at within the global container shipping market. Do you think that will make a difference?
Well, I'm not too sure. I'm more an expert on air than on ocean. We saw for a while that the pure availability of capacity was the issue, the main issue. But we see now a compounded impact. And yeah, I would like to think that at the moment it's just shortage of staff, which is really making the global supply chain hurt. Just not having people available. If you test positive on COVID, but you can do your work from home, that's okay. But pilots, people loading planes, people building pallets or warehouses, they can't do their work from home. And with the number of COVID infections around the world, that is massively reducing the available workforce and therefore hurting the global supply chain.
Neil, I have to ask you about the environment, because it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that flying by air is going to be not as kind to the environment as taking a container ship by sea, even though that might take longer. So what provisions are in place? Is this bad news for the environment while it's good news for air freight?
Well, I think that's a short-term versus a long-term discussion. The industry is very aware of its responsibility in trying to reduce its footprint. And therefore we see companies teaming up to invest and buy sustainable aviation fuel to reduce their global footprint. Sorry, the carbon footprint. But on the short term, yes, you're right, of course. Moving more stuff by air instead of ground, ocean, will increase the carbon footprint of that logistic supply chain.
So it increases the carbon footprint, and it could be more expensive at a time when many people are feeling a bit of a squeeze already. Neil, absolute pleasure talking to you. Neil van der Wel from Xeneta. Interesting stuff, eh?
Thank you.
Juliet, thank you very much. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, 2 weeks of gridlock in the Canadian capital. Truck drivers hold firm in their stand against vaccine mandates.
It is now important that all of us in Europe act very swiftly.
Fines for the non-vaccinated will most likely be between $1,000 and $4,000.
The new Omicron variant circulating in southern Africa.
The financial markets have also reacted badly to the news.
Growing dissatisfaction with the way the Dutch government is handling the pandemic.
Cancelling the city's main public Christmas markets for the second year in a row.
Protests and riots by those opposed to restrictions and vaccinations.
There is no room for complacency in this ongoing battle against COVID.
On the agenda with me, Stephen Cole, we look up into space. We look down into data. We look at debt. We look at politics. We look at opioids, climate change. We look at all the issues that really matter around the world. But you matter too. We want to tell the stories you want to see and hear about. Make it your agenda.
The agreement is signed. But what is the real deal now the UK has left the EU? For trade, for business, for the city, for ordinary people. Make sense of Brexit with CGTN.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Robin Dwyer. The headlines again. Latest round of international diplomacy to avoid a conflict over Ukraine. Now the UK's Foreign Secretary heads to Moscow.
Our other headlines, scientists in the UK make a major breakthrough in nuclear fusion, harnessing the energy source of the stars.
And a reversal of fortune for some of the world's big names in the car industry, with profit falls, recalls and legal action.
The British Prime Minister says all remaining COVID restrictions in England could end later this month, weeks ahead of schedule. Boris Johnson faced lawmakers for the first time since he reshuffled his cabinet, his top team, seen as an attempt to try and calm repeated calls for his resignation. Let's talk to our correspondent Andrew Wilson, who's been following events for us. Andrew, let's start with the possible scrapping of COVID rules early. How significant is this?
Well, it's not a hard thing to achieve as far as the COVID rules are concerned. They are all due to expire anyway at the end of March. To extend them beyond that would require new legislation and all sorts of other conversations in Cabinet. And the government's already made it quite clear that its target is set on stopping all COVID rules by the end of March. So bringing it forward by 1 month is no big deal, to be honest. It means that people won't have to wear masks on public transport, but it also means that if people find themselves testing positive, they don't have to necessarily self-isolate. They'll have the choice, of course, but it won't be compulsory anymore, and it'll mean slightly lax rules for travellers. Now, all this is the Prime Minister addressing the main threat to his position as Prime Minister, which is his own party. The opposition can complain about him all they like, but it's his own party that have the gift to remove him from office if they want to with some kind of a leadership challenge. So he needs to build a few bridges back there, and that's one way of building bridges. Certainly the right of the party, the Brexiteers, led by characters like Jacob Rees-Mogg and Steve Barclay, they believe very strongly that COVID restrictions should be as minimal as possible to allow the economy to carry on and even possibly flourish. So that is for their benefit. Remember also he's had a mini reshuffle in Downing Street, and Steve Barclay has been now made Chief of Staff, replacing a civil servant with an MP. So he's given a lot of the power and influence to those in the party that have it within their gift to remove him. So he is fighting a lot of battles, and this is one way of doing that to save his job.
I can tell the House today that it is my intention to return on the first day after the half-term recess to present our strategy for living with COVID. Provided the current encouraging trends in the data continue, it is my expectation that we will be able to end the last domestic restrictions, including the legal requirement to self-isolate if you test positive, a full month early, Mr. Speaker.
Andrew, there was a big focus on policy today rather than those illegal lockdown parties. Will this have steadied the ship for Johnson after weeks of pressure?
Well, I think what the Prime Minister has to cope with now is that after weeks and months of attacks in Parliament surrounding these gatherings in Downing Street and other government offices, other elements of running the country are coming to the surface, having been kept in the background for quite some time. Prime Minister's questions today, where you just saw the Prime Minister in that clip there, fielded all sorts of questions to do with the cost of living, which is now a crisis very much on the front pages, the boost in price of natural gas. The lifting of the energy cap in April means that households are going to face some serious difficulties, what with rising inflation and the cost of energy as well. There were questions about crime figures, questions again about the Northern Ireland Protocol, and problems of institutional racism and misogyny in the police. So there's a flood of other issues coming to the fore now, which the Prime Minister must field. But to an extent, the less he talks about Partygate, the more it seems like a Prime Minister just getting on with the job of government. However, there was a couple of instances in Prime Minister's questions today where the issue of Partygate came up again, and the Prime Minister found himself having to be reminded, perhaps, of the vulnerability and the existence of the police investigation, which has yet to report.
This time last week, we were talking about the Prime Minister's time running out. What is your sense? Do you think he's in a safer position tonight?
I think the Prime Minister is still in the wind in terms of being vulnerable to different events that may or may not happen. There's been a steady leak of more revelations about parties in Downing Street, so there may be more of that kind of bad news still to come. There is a new photograph in one of the newspapers here in the UK today showing Boris Johnson in the same picture as a couple of members of staff, some Christmas decorations and an opened bottle of Prosecco, so there's still reminders coming along of these parties, and of course these two reports still to be delivered, the full Sue Gray report and the Metropolitan Police report. Now, the crucial part of the diary for the Prime Minister now is we are facing a 2-week break where Parliament goes into recess. MPs will go back to their constituencies and they'll talk to each other and they'll talk to their constituents as well and test the ground and see how people feel about Boris Johnson. Now the situation has calmed a little bit, but the issue of the parties has not gone away. Boris Johnson is no doubt an electoral asset to the Conservative Party. He has a winning way when campaigning, and that's override all other considerations. However, MPs will now have to consider whether that is enough to allow him, with his reputation perhaps damaged, if not permanently stained, his integrity in question, whether one outweighs the other. And those are the decisions that Conservative MPs are going to be making over the next couple of weeks in preparation for the report from the police and the report from Sue Gray. They have yet to make up their minds, and that means that the Prime Minister cannot relax and consider himself completely past it yet.
Andrew, thanks for that. Our correspondent, Andrew Wilson.
Sweden has scrapped its last remaining COVID restrictions.
Limits on gatherings have been removed, and the use of vaccine certificates and rules on hospitality opening hours are no longer in force. It's also stopped wide-scale testing. Sweden has also taken a relatively hands-off approach to the pandemic, never going into lockdown or closing businesses.
Canada's capital remains paralysed for a second week as truck drivers protest against COVID-19 restrictions and vaccine mandates. Thousands of people have been camped out in tents and vehicles in Ottawa and say they won't leave until the restrictions are lifted. The protest has also moved out of the capital, with truckers shutting down one of the busiest border crossings with the United States. Well, let's go now to Ottawa and talk to our correspondent, Dan Williams. So, Dan, protests in the capital showing no signs of going away.
Absolutely, yeah. Certainly no end in sight from what I can see here of this protest. You can probably hear behind me various trucks now revving their engines. It's all really just come to life in about the last 30 minutes or so. There's a stage that's now opened up behind me on one of the trailers as well. This is all on top of Parliament Hill. This whole area, has to be said, is now fully overwhelmed. It's complete gridlock here in this downtown area. You can see Parliament Hill behind me, and it just seems like there is absolutely no end in sight to this. The truck drivers I've spoken to say they are not going to give up until their demands have been heard. And certainly this was all sparked, wasn't it, from these vaccine mandates that truck drivers had to undertake in order to cross the US-Canada border. Those mandates sparked this protest, but it's morphed into much more than that as well. Since then, it's now very much calling for all restrictions in terms of vaccine and mask wearing and the like to be now withdrawn. And speaking to many of the truck drivers here, they're saying they're not going away. They're here for the long run. And what's very clear as well, to the side of me, there's food being given out to the truck drivers. There's fuel being brought in to keep the truck drivers warm at night as well. It's very cold here, it has to be said. And as I say, they're here, if you excuse the pun, they're here for the long haul.
So revving engines and a gridlock where you are, and it seems that the protest is now broadening to other areas too.
That's right, yeah. Ambassador Bridge, which links Canada to the US. It's Detroit, Windsor. It's one of the key crossing points for Canada. Around 30% of trade, annual trade, comes through that border crossing. And on Monday evening, truck drivers there, lorry drivers there, also overwhelmed and continued with their protest there, blocked that key route. Now, on Tuesday, there were reports that police had freed it up that route to a certain extent, but it seems as though the delays and that route is now continuing to be blocked, and that will have an impact, there's no doubt, on supply chains. We've already had reports of auto and grocery supply chains being impacted by that. But what's very clear, speaking to some of the protesters here, is that they're expecting that this protest will continue to gather speed. They're expecting further cities across Canada to also have similar kind of blockades, similar kind of protests. So we're very much expecting to see that taking place over the course of the next few days. As this gathers pace, they're expecting this also to go further into the US as well, considering a lot of the drivers spend a lot of their time crossing through that border. So this is by no means at the end, and it really asks the question is how will this come to an end, given that there is just so much difference between what the government are saying and what the truck drivers here are demanding.
Dan Williams in Ottawa, thanks very much for that update.
Japan is sending more shipments of gas to Europe amid fears that a Russian invasion of Ukraine could disrupt supplies. The Japanese government says the European Union and the United States both asked Tokyo to send more liquefied natural gas to Europe. Governments across the continent are spending billions of dollars to try to shield consumers from record energy prices.
3 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces in the occupied West Bank city of Nablus. Israel says the men were militants responsible for recent shooting attacks. The Palestinian Authority has condemned the assassinations, calling them a heinous crime.
The Democratic Republic of Congo has been awarded $325 million in reparations for an invasion by Ugandan-backed forces in 1998. The International Criminal Court in The Hague had already ruled in favour of the DRC back in 2005, but the case returned to court after talks over financial compensation broke down. As our correspondent John Beaver now reports, the devastating impact of the conflict is still being felt.
It's a legal case that stretches back more than 20 years for a conflict that officially lasted 5 years and killed thousands of people. As legal arguments were being weighed up in a series of long-running hearings, millions were still dying of starvation and disease, and hostilities continued after the official ceasefire. Uganda was one of the countries that invaded Congolese land when it sent troops into the gold-rich Ituri province in 1998 and backed rebel groups that plundered resources and engaged in ethnically motivated conflict. Back in 2005, the International Court of Justice in The Hague found Uganda guilty of entering the DRC by force and fighters it supported guilty of murdering, raping and torturing civilians. After talks over reparations broke down, the Democratic Republic of Congo has now been awarded $325 million, far below the billions initially being sought, and the court entirely rejected claims about the damage done to the economy.
The DRC has not provided a basis for arriving at even a rough estimate of any possible macroeconomic damage. The court therefore cannot award compensation to the DRC for losses allegedly arising from the general disruption to the economy as a result of the conflict. The court thus rejects the claim of the DRC for macroeconomic damage.
On numerous occasions, the court referred to the limited evidence supplied to support claims about the damage done and crimes committed in the DRC. It highlighted the difficulties with establishing the exact impact of the conflict in remote regions many years ago. The ruling comes at a time when Ugandan troops are back in the DRC, conducting joint operations with the Congolese army to root out militants of the Allied Democratic Forces in the east of the country. This ruling should mark the end of the legal hearings, but instability and violence in the DRC continues to this day, almost 25 years since it began. John Bieber, CGTN, Brussels.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. First man to win an alpine skiing gold at 3 consecutive Olympic Games.
So this is it. I'm just about to be shot.
Tents here, bottles are being thrown as they do so.
There are about 3 critical bridges here in Malawi. That's one of them. We're going to cross that bridge.
As you can see behind me, police forces
who are replying with gas. Gas just came in.
Gas. So it's all begun now. Divisions leading the charge into West Mosul have brought us here.
Just gotta be careful here with some gunshots.
This is where most of the fighting has been concentrated.
It's the front line now after 9 days of fighting.
We're about 2 to 3 kilometers from
within
the front
clear
line.
view of this front line position.
Murray, what would you say is a good question?
Stephen, I'd say it's one where there's always more than one answer.
The Answers Project is a new podcast series from CGTN Europe. With me, Stephen Cole.
And me, Mari Beveridge. In each episode, we'll take a complex question.
And with the help of some of the world's foremost experts, shine light on some of the answers. So join us for The Answers Project.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe. Just in time for Valentine's Day, one of the most famous depictions of love is being offered for sale in digital form.
The kiss, painted by Gustav Klimt, will be sold as a non-fungible token, a digital copy with proof of ownership. Johannes Pleshberger reports from Vienna.
Love is in the air. If a romantic trip to see the kiss in Vienna is not on the cards, the painting can come to you. The Belvedere Museum has launched a sale of a limited number of digital cutouts of what is probably the most famous depiction of lovers, just in time for Valentine's Day, so you can make a digital declaration of love.
Every owner can dedicate and show his love to someone with this NFT. We do not only make a copy of the original, but we divide it in 10,000 pieces. And each piece is an image for itself.
The NFTs, short for non-fungible tokens, can be purchased up until Valentine's Day for around $2,100 each. It's an effort to reach unconventional art collectors as well as people who are not normally museum goers.
If the trend continues, it will disrupt the traditional art market, but of course not replace it, but complement it.
Crypto economics expert Alfred Daudes highlights the rapid growth of NFT sales. While its market volume amounted to $100 million for the entire year of 2020, it now stands at $4 billion per month. But digital art can be vulnerable to fraud.
One problem of these open NFT marketplaces is that you don't have an identity and proof of authenticity. Because basically everybody can copy a digital file and claim that he's the author.
So-called closed NFT marketplaces usually provide better protection against scams, while still offering an opportunity for artists to sell their digital work directly. And for the museum, it could provide much-needed funds. If by Valentine's Day all digital parts of the kiss painting are sold, the Belvedere earns more than $20 million. This is about 2/3 of the museum's annual turnover. Johannes Pleshberger, CGTN, Vienna.
The United States has won its first gold medal at the Beijing Winter Olympics after Lindsay Jacobellis triumphing in the women's snowboard cross.
It's the first time the snowboarder has won gold in 5 Olympic appearances. She's also the oldest US woman ever to win a Winter Olympic event. She was within meters of winning in 2006 when a showboating trick went wrong and she was overtaken at the finish line.
Well, Austria's Matthias Mayr has become the first man to win an alpine skiing gold medal at 3 consecutive Winter Olympics. CGTN's correspondent Feng Yilei has the story.
Austrian skier Matthias Mayr defends his Super G champion title at the Olympics. That came after he won a bronze medal in downhill events less than 24 hours prior.
It feels great to win here in Beijing. It was a great race and very happy about this success. I had a good preparation, I had a good summer with good skiing and also pretty good material. I have to thank the Austrian Ski Federation and also head my ski company. We did a really good job over the last month and yeah, I'm pretty happy with this success.
His performance across 3 games is unmatched in men's racing history.
Our athlete was really in the focus and I think we was a little bit lucky with the conditions and so on, and the number was also really good for us, and so came this success from Matthias.
Ahead of the competition, the medal winner and team coaches have given feedback on the organizing of the games.
It is really good snow, it is really good terrain, it's nice to ski.
All the team members are really happy. I mean, the organization is really good. I mean, the Olympic Village, you can have everything you need.
The team coaches say they are still in careful preparation for future races, hoping for more medals. Feng Yilei, CGTN, Yanqing.
And finally, a wee dram with a big price tag. The Macallan Distillery in Scotland has unveiled a whisky distilled in 1940, 1 year into the Second World War, after the whisky maker decided it had reached maturity. The single malt is called the Reach, but it will be out of reach for most. 1 decanter will set you back nearly $125,000. That values the sherry-seasoned cask of whisky at more than $35 million. Fans of the Macallan include British secret agent 007 James Bond.
The headlines again, the latest round of international diplomacy to avoid a conflict over Ukraine. Now the UK's Foreign Secretary heads to Moscow.
Scientists in the UK make a major breakthrough on nuclear fusion, harnessing the energy source of the stars.
And a reversal of fortune for some of the world's big names in the car industry, with profit falls, recalls and legal action.
That's it for Global Business Europe. Thanks for watching.
More on all of our stories at europe.cgtn.com, and do follow CGTN Europe on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram.
We're on Smart TV apps, Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube and Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK on Freeview.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Goodbye.